When we were reading the script for Blasted, it was quite obvious why a lot of people didn't really like Kane's style and why they called it in your face theatre. And especially why they said that she did it all just to shock the audience and there was no meaning behind it. It was quite hard to read, especially when other people were reading it, and it allowed you to really think about what might be going on. I think it would be quite interesting to watch it to see how they go about trying to tackle some of the things that would be quite hard to show on stage, such as the rape and the eyeballs getting sucked out, and potentially even Ian eating the baby at the end. While we were reading it, it was quite obvious what Kane was doing with the chapters, with the scenes. Each scene got shorter, and each scene added an extra layer of shock on top of it. So to start off with, it was very much just Ian being a bit horrible and quite racist and nasty in a way, being potentially quite sexist as well towards Kate. And the age difference as well, especially watching it, would play a massive part in how the audience would feel. Whereas reading it, that kind of took a bit of a back seat while you were reading exactly what Ian was saying. The first scene wasn't too hard to read. It was just, once you kind of got used to the different slurs that Ian was using, it wasn't too shocking in a way. Because scene one is so long, it wasn't, towards the end of it, it got almost normal the way that he was talking, despite the fact that at the beginning it was so horrible to watch and to listen to. Because scene one is 28 pages long, towards the end of it, you'd be almost as if like, okay, what's next? I've got used to this is almost normal in a way. What's happening now? Scene two's next layer is very much the violence between the two. It's heavily implied that Ian had raped Kate in the night. And especially the very beginning of it, it's the very beginning is quite hard to read, and I think it would be harder to watch because it's about Kate trying to use her sexuality to gain power over Ian, which after it's done, it's reading it again, the soldier doesn't die in scene 3. He dies at the beginning of scene 4, but scene 3 is all about the soldier emphasising to Ian what lengths he's willing to go to survive in this world. It starts out with the soldier just taking the power from Ian, commanding him about, and because of his logic is that he has a gun and the other one doesn't. The soldier then goes on to a story about his ex-girlfriend who died because of other soldiers. And the story that he tells is very hard to read because it goes into very intricate little details that you never really want to think about both the soldier raping a group of people and the way that his girlfriend was killed. And eventually it gets on to the soldier saying what he's going to do to Ian. And while Ian is very much against it, he knows that he doesn't really have a say in it. So scene 3 is definitely about the power struggle and the soldier asserting dominance over Ian, and the fact that because the soldier is willing to go to more lengths and knows potentially more about the real world in this alternate reality than Ian does, it's about him showing that and showing Ian that he is able to control Ian and make him do whatever he likes. So at the beginning of scene 4, or at the end of scene 3 first, it's the soldier raping Ian, and then at the end, while telling the story about his girlfriend, and then at the end, almost as if he's going to kill Ian, puts the gun up his anus, and then he gets on top of him and sucks his eyes out, bites it off, and then eats it, which, while reading it, would be very hard to imagine it actually happening on stage. I think watching it would be incredibly hard because you're seeing this happen to someone on stage and you know that no matter what you do, it's going to happen. And even though you know it's fake, you want to do something about it because it's so difficult to imagine what they must be going through. At the beginning of scene 4, it's the soldier who has killed himself, and Kate enters, and it's from the very beginning, it's Kate showing that she has more power than Ian because he's on the floor and he's blind and he's weak and frail. Kate's first line to him is, "You're a nightmare." Obviously that's very different to how she was before in scene 1 and 2. Because before, Kate would never say that. She wouldn't even dare try and hurt or annoy Ian in a way because she knows the repercussions that'll come after. But at this point, she must have been affected by what happened out in the world rather than in the hotel room. And it must have changed in a way, and also seeing Ian in this state in which he's so frail and weak must have definitely changed her opinion of him and made her think that she'd be able to get away with more things. The main part in scene 4 that I think would be the hardest bit to watch would be Ian asking Kate for the gun, and while Kate gets it, she empties out the bullets, which prevents Ian from shooting either him or her. It's also that Kate comes back with a baby and it's constantly crying, and I think having that sound in the background while all this is going on just adds to the shock factor and the harshness of what's actually going on, because at this point a lot of the shock will have worn off, especially with how Ian talks or the kind of words that they use. But having that baby crying reminds us of the innocence that might be that out there in the world, and reminds us that actually what we're seeing is incredibly destructive, and the words that are using aren't normal words, even though they might seem like it at this point, because potentially the audience is so used to it. The hardest bit, I think, is partially Ian, when he tries to shoot himself, is the desperateness that comes along with it when he can't because there are no bullets. I think it's less of the fact that you feel sorry for him, more of the fact that you've seen his downfall and you've seen what he used to be, and you can almost empathise with him in that downfall of power, and in that moment that he's at his weakness, he can't even get what he wants. When just a few potentially hours earlier he could click his fingers and get whatever he wanted. Quite soon after that, Kate realizes that the baby is dead, and she then bursts out laughing. In the script it says, Kate bursts out laughing unnaturally, hysterically, and uncontrollably. I think listening to that would be so hard, because a baby just died and she's laughing because of it, and the fact that it's hysterical and uncontrollable, it makes it that harder, because you know that the world that they're in, a baby dying is potentially so normal that they can see the irony in it, and the fact that the baby is able to die and Ian isn't, despite him being an adult. Scene 5, the beginning of it is all about Kate saying that she's going to go out and get food, and heavily implying that she's going to sell herself to soldiers to try and get this food and water. And Ian starts off saying that she shouldn't do it and she shouldn't go, she's not like that. But then at the very end, after she's gone, he says, if you get some food, as if he's always trying to use her, because even though, I think he's just saying that she shouldn't go because that's the right thing to say, but it's not because he actually means it. He wants her to go, he wants her to get food so that he can survive. After that, it goes through a series of mini scenes, in a way, of there being blackouts, and then Ian doing different things, which I think would be very hard to watch, because you've seen the downfall of him, you've seen everything that's happened to him, and it's got to the point in which he can't help anything, especially as he's blind. He doesn't know what he's doing, in a way. I think the worst bit is that at the beginning, when they first step into this hotel room, which is described to be really posh and really expensive, and Ian's first line is, I've shat in better places than this. And then in one of the mini scenes, it's him shitting on the floor without being able to have any help with it or go to the toilet or anything. He's blind and he's weak and he's in a room that's been blown up. That downfall, I think, while the audience doesn't care much about Ian, they care more about the world that he's living in, the fact that that could happen to anyone, the fact that everyone is reverted back to this pre-civilization stage in which they're not civilized, they have no hygiene, and they're not capable of doing anything themselves without help. And then these mini scenes carry on until at the end he takes out the baby's body from a hole that Kate put it in, and he starts eating it out of sheer hunger, because Kate has supposedly been away for that long that he's got to the point where he has to eat his own kind to try and survive. In the stage directions, it says he dies with relief, and then eventually he wakes up. I think the stage directions aren't very clear as to what happened, but watching it might be a lot clearer, but it's what happens after is potentially quite unclear as to whether it's real or not, because Kate comes in with food and she has it herself first and then gives some to Ian, and then Ian saying thank you at the end. It's very unclear as to whether that has actually happened, because it says that Ian has died, but he then comes back to life, so whether that's potentially in heaven, in a way, in the fact that Kate has also died while selling herself for food and out there in the world, and that they're meeting in some sort of afterlife or not, whether it is real, maybe he just fainted, it's quite unclear, and it's potentially up to the director's interpretation as to what they do. Overall, reading the script, it definitely gives you an insight as to Sarah Kane's style and the fact and the reason why a lot of journalists and reporters said that it's just shocking for the sake of being shocking and it's got no meaning behind it. But I think if you actually dive into it and you try and figure out the meaning, it definitely has one, and it's quite strong in its ideology, in the fact that it's war reverts everyone to a fundamental level in which is pre-civilization, and it doesn't matter how well off you are or how civilized you are beforehand. Once it's happened, you've got no hope, and everyone is put on the same level. Whether you're the richest man alive or you've got barely any food to survive on, everyone is brought down to the same level.